stifling, oppressive humidity of a small-town Ohio summer, 17-year-old Sophia stood frozen before her bedroom mirror. The late-night silence was broken only by the drone of a distant fan and the ragged sound of her own breathing. For 3 long months, the insidious black speck on the bridge of her nose had been her secret torment. It began as a tiny, itchy bump after a carefree night of backyard camping with friends, a souvenir from sleeping under the stars. She dismissed it as a bug bite or a stubborn pimple, a minor nuisance in the chaos of teenage life, but it had evolved into something sinister, darkening to an oily, poreless void, swelling with a subtle, firm pressure, and emitting a faint, pulsating throb that echoed in the quiet of the night, stealing her sleep, driven by a desperate need for flawless skin before senior year and the looming pressure of prom photos. She turned to online tutorials that screamed blackhead extraction. With the promise of instant, satisfying results, Sophia, her judgment clouded by anxiety, ignored the whispers of doubt. Armed with a sewing needle sterilized in a candle flame, a pair of tweezers gripped like surgical instruments, and a headlamp that cast long, dramatic shadows across her face, she leaned into the mirror. "This ends tonight," she whispered to her reflection, her voice a tremulous mix of determination and fear. She had no way of knowing that the blackhead was a deceptive mask, concealing a colony of horrors that had been seeded into her skin during that fateful night under the stars. The camping trip, a memory of laughter and freedom, had become the origin of a nightmare waiting to erupt. The camping trip replayed in flashes as she prepared, laughter around a flickering fire, esmores sticky on fingers, and a midnight dare to explore the overgrown woods bordering the site. Sophia had wandered off alone, drawn to a cluster of wildflowers buzzing with life. She remembered slapping at her face after feeling a tiny swarm, tiny ants, she thought, nothing more. One bite on her nose stung sharply, but she rubbed it away and rejoined the group. Back home, the bump emerged days later, innocuous at first. Over-the-counter creams failed, pore strips peeled off empty. It grew resistant, the center blackening like a portal to something alive beneath. Friends noticed, nicknaming it her nose tattoo. Forums warned of cysts or infections, but Sophia scrolled past horror stories of parasites, convincing herself it was purely cosmetic. As prom loomed, vanity overrode fear. The house creaked emptily, her parents away for the weekend, leaving her alone with the mirror's merciless glare. Heart hammering, Sophia pinched the swollen skin, squeezing with mounting pressure. A bead of pus escaped, foul-smelling and yellowish, but the core held defiant. Pain lanced through her face like fire, deeper. She gasped, pricking the black center with the needle. Blood welled, mixing with a clear, watery fluid that dripped like tears. The area inflamed instantly, red and angry. Sweat slit her palms as she probed the tweezers in, fishing blindly. She felt resistance, a gritty, shifting mass that seemed to fight back. What if it bursts wrong? What if it scars forever? Panic whispered of ER visits, but pride pushed harder. With a final, guttural yank, the surface gave way, but it wasn't a plug. It was a cascade. Tiny black specks tumbled out, wriggling frantically on the vanity. Sophia's scream shattered the quiet as she recoiled, the mirror reflecting pure chaos. Dozens, then hundreds of minuscule ants poured from the wound in a living, seizing torrent. They weren't ordinary ants, these were the larvae of a rare parasitic ant species, rumored in local folklore as skin burrowers. The queen ant from that woodsy swarm had injected her eggs directly into the bite, using Sophia's pore as a hidden nest. The blackhead was the sealed entry wound, a cap under which the colony had incubated, feeding on tissue and moisture. Now unleashed, the larvae squirmed across the counter, some still emerging in waves, their tiny, segmented bodies hooked for burrowing. Sophia hyperventilated, slapping at her nose as more trickled out, a relentless, itching, burning flood. Visions of them tunneling deeper into her sinuses, her brain, paralyzed her. Grabbing a tissue, she smeared the swarm, but they scattered, some crawling up her fingers. Bile rose as she bolted for the bathroom sink, flooding her face with water. But the exodus continued, a black river of life erupting from her flesh. Trembling uncontrollably, Sophia dialed 911, her voice breaking. "Something is coming out of my nose. Bugs, eggs, I don't know." The operator's calm questions blurred as she scooped the wriggling mass into a damp paper towel, sealing it in a jar as proof. Sirens wailed in the distance, arriving with flashing lights that lit her porch like a crime scene. Paramedics burst in, their faces masking shock as she thrust the jar forward. Larvae still hatching, ants maturing in real time, tiny bodies twitching. "Get them out," she sobbed, "all of them." The ambulance ride was a torment of itchiness and phantom crawls under her skin. What if remnants lurked? What if the queen survived inside? The ER was a whirlwind of controlled panic. The jar was passed from a wide-eyed nurse to a horrified attending physician. Sophia was rushed into an isolation room, where doctors in protective gear swarmed her. "Cutaneous myiasis," one doctor muttered to another, his voice low. "But I've never seen a species like this. It's like they cultivated a nest." Using specialized magnifying lenses and fine-tipped forceps, they worked for hours under bright lights, meticulously extracting every remaining egg and larva from the cavernous wound on her nose. They flushed the sinus cavities with sterile solution, watching the fluid for any sign of movement. Each tiny, wriggling body dropped into a specimen jar felt like a victory and a fresh wave of horror. The final, most terrifying moment came when a senior entomologist, called in from a nearby university, identified the queen's remains, a larger, decomposed form deep within the tissue. The colony had been preparing to spawn a new generation. Sophia was admitted for observation, pumped full of antibiotics and antiparasitic medication. The physical ordeal was over, but the psychological siege had just begun. That night, hooked to IVs, she jolted awake from a fever dream, screaming that she felt them hatching in her bones. Weeks later, the wound on her nose healed into a pale, pitted scar. But a deeper scar remained. Sophia refused to go into her backyard. The scent of damp earth made her nauseous. The buzz of a fly sent her into a panic. She saw her therapist twice a week, trying to untangle the trauma of having her body used as a host. The prom came and went. Sophia didn't go. The photos from that night showed her classmates, smiling in glittering dresses and sharp tuxedos. Sophia's photo was a selfie from her bedroom, a small, brave smile on her face, the scar on her nose visible. The caption read, "Still here." The jar of ants was sent to a specialized lab. The official report confirmed a mutated, highly aggressive species of parasitic ant, previously undocumented. The investigation focused on the woods behind her house, an area marked for new development. The incident was quietly classified, a bizarre and terrifying anomaly, but for Sophia, it was never an anomaly, it was a violation. She had learned a brutal lesson about the hidden dangers of the natural world, and the even greater danger of ignoring a small, persistent sign that something is terribly wrong. The world was not just something to be lived in, it was something that could, without warning, decide to live in you. And the most frightening monsters weren't the ones in the dark, they were the ones that could grow in the light, right on the tip of your nose, while you convinced yourself it was only a pimple. The ER swallowed her into a frenzy of beeping monitors, sharp shouts, and the acrid sting of disinfectants. Dr. Harlan, an entomologist turned ER specialist, was summoned urgently. Under the bright glare of a surgical light, his gloved fingers probed the gaping pore with a magnifying lens. His diagnosis was swift and chilling, a dermatomyces-like infestation from Formica parasitica, a rogue, parasitic ant variant known to nest in mammals. The eggs, injected via a sting, had hatched en masse. Nurses hovered wide-eyed as he irrigated the wound with saline, flushing waves of wriggling larvae into a stainless steel basin. But the nest ran deep, its tunnels honeycombing the tissue beneath her skin. Clusters of eggs clung like sinister pearls, under local anesthesia that numbed her face but not her terror. Dr. Harlan made a careful incision, revealing the full horror, a pulsating, gelatinous sack of eggs, guarded by worker ants that had matured inside. Fiercely defending their brood, tension electrified the room. Dr. Harlan delved deeper with fine-tipped forceps while nurses prepped suction. The first pull extracted a veined, gelatinous cluster. Dozens of eggs burst on contact, releasing a fresh wave of larvae. A young nurse whimpered, backing away. Then came the queen, enormous for her kind, bloated and armored. She was extracted inch by wriggling inch, as she emerged, her mandibles snapping feebly at the air. The medical team's composure shattered. A young aide screamed first, a high-pitched, raw sound of terror that echoed off the sterile walls. Another gagged, dropping a metal tray with a deafening crash. "They're everywhere, get it out," a third shrieked, clutching her own arms as if feeling the infestation crawl over her skin. "It's alive, the whole colony is alive." Pandemonium erupted, screams overlapped as staff scrambled for additional masks and gloves. The queen thrashed in the specimen jar like a demon unleashed. Even Dr. Harlan flinched as the main sac ruptured, spilling hundreds more larvae that swarmed across the sterile field in a black, writhing tide. The extraction dragged on for hours, a meticulous, agonizing process of suctioning tunnels, flushing with tissue-safe insecticides, and cauterizing burrows to prevent regrowth, under sedation. Sophia drifted in nightmares of endless crawling. The final count, over 500 eggs and larvae, plus 47 mature adult ants. The queen was preserved for study. The staff's screams had stemmed from a visceral, primal revulsion, the sight of a teenage girl's face birthing a voracious, organized insect empire, worse than maggots, a nurse confessed later, pale and shaken. These were organized, they were building inside her. Dawn broke as Sophia woke, her face heavily bandaged, IVs pumping antibiotics and antihistamines into her veins. The wound gaped but was clean, stitched with promises of minimal scarring. Outside her room, news crews swarmed. Teen's nose becomes ant nest. The headlines would blare. Blurred videos of the thrashing queen in the jar sparked global buzz and spikes in entomophobia. Entomologists confirmed the species was a mutated strain from invasive woodland pests. Warning of potential rising cases, weeks of recovery followed, antibiotic creams, therapy for the deep psychological trauma, and a newfound, profound weariness of the outdoors. Sophia's prom was skipped, but she emerged with a hardened strength, launching a viral TikTok series on safe bug repellents and the dire dangers of DIY extractions. Classmates gawked at first, but their stares soon turned to admiration for her surreal survival tale. Months later, the physical wound on her nose had healed surprisingly smooth, leaving only the faintest silvery line, a subtle, almost invisible badge of survival. Yet, in quiet moments, phantom itches would return, a ghostly echo of the infestation that made her flinch and reach for the spot. She found herself unconsciously avoiding mirrors, the memory of that night a permanent ghost haunting the glass. Sophia's ordeal became a stark, whispered warning among her friends and, eventually, a cautionary tale that spread further. It carried a terrifying truth. Some blackheads are not mere clogged pores, they are masks, hiding entire empires of life waiting to colonize. A single bite, one overlooked sting in the wrong place at the wrong time, and your body can become a battlefield for a life form you never knew existed. As she stood at her window one evening, her finger touching the faint scar with a ginger, unconscious pressure, a chill seemed to whisper through the room. A vow etched into her very being: never again. But outside, in the deep, shadowed woods behind her house, life continued its ancient, relentless cycle. Under the blanket of fallen leaves and within the damp, rich soil, the ants marched on in their intricate, unknowable legions. New queens, born with the same primal instinct, took flight on the warm air, eternally seeking, probing, searching for the next suitable host. The threat was not gone, it was merely waiting, a part of the world as permanent as the soil itself. That's all about our stories. Do you have any thoughts after hearing the story? Please share it in the comments below.